Hi, Rogue Reader here, and I have another first reading review today. As I said in my last first reading, I've been behind on a couple of the newer Star Wars releases, and I'm slowly going through those and trying to catch up. And as I do, I thought it might just be fun to give my first thoughts on essentially a first reading, a more unofficial review, not scripted, just kind of my general thoughts, again, after my first reading of a book. And today, it is going to be Star Wars The Acolyte Wayseeker. I'm not going to go into super heavy spoiler territory or anything like that. Just kind of the basic setup is what I'm looking at. And any maybe like kind of common themes we'll see as I go through it. But I'm not looking to specifically spoil anything that happens in this novel. Again, just the basic setup. So this book, it is written by Justina Ireland. She has experience writing High Republic novels. She's been writing them for a little bit in Star Wars, and specifically she has been writing them for this main character, Vernestra. So she's no stranger to this character. I believe she wrote even the first book that Vernestra was in, which was a Test of Courage, which I also have. So again, she knows this character. But the setup is that this book, it does take place, far in after the kind of the events of the main High Republic initiative going on, and a little bit before the Acolyte show. It follows Vernestra and Master Indara, also from the Acolyte, as they have to embark on a mission together to deal with a criminal that has brought up some new weapon that could be a threat. That's the general idea of this novel. I guess I should mention what I think of the High Republic and the Acolyte itself. I'm a pretty big fan of the High Republic. It's a really good book initiative that Disney's done with it. And it reminds me very much of kind of the old post-Return of Jedi Legends Star Wars novels, and that it's this era that is really mainly focused on just these new characters. And there's not really, other than Yoda, who, his appearance in some of the stories vary, it's really just met about all these new characters, their interactions with each other, and just a new threat that we haven't seen before with the Nile. And again, I enjoy the High Republic. It definitely has some highs and lows. There's some hits and there's some misses with it. But overall, it's been very enjoyable to read. And it reminds me of those old post-Return of the Jedi Legend days, where you just had all these, even though, Luke and Han and Leia were part of those stories, you had these new characters you got to follow too. And that was always fun. In terms of the Acolyte, I did like the Acolyte as well. It took me about, I think, 2 episodes to decide if I was getting into it, and then I did really enjoy it. I am sad that it's probably not going to be continued, at least in TV form. I think it had a lot of promise, and I was excited to see where that plot was going to go. I'm sure they'll pick it up again in books and things. It's just unfortunate that for the more common fan, they probably won't be able to see. There probably won't be a live-action continuation of that story. But I did enjoy The Acolyte very much. So what I think about the plot of Wayseeker, again, it's Vernestra and Master Indara, and they have to solve... basically, they have to go and... stop this criminal that's developing this new weapon that can be turn out to be a pretty big game changer if it's allowed to be produced. It's the story itself. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I enjoyed this novel. I wasn't ever on necessarily the edge of my seat, but I wasn't bored either. I was interested enough to keep going and find out what was going to happen. I think it's an enjoyable enough novel in that regard. I do enjoy the themes presented here. So really, this is a book about 2 characters that are in their own way running from something. So Vernestra, she is the Wayseeker here. She has become a Jedi Wayseeker, which means they don't really follow the council. They kind of go off and they do whatever the Force wills. And she's doing this because she's suffered... it seems that she's tired because her species is very long-lived. She's kind of tired of outliving people that she knows and loves. And then it also seems that something mysterious happened with her last apprentice that we don't know about. Obviously, they're alluding to the stranger here from the Acolyte, but we never do get to find out what those details are. I'm sure that'll be saved for another story later. Whatever did happen, it was enough that she is kind of retreating. She's kind of retreating from the Jedi in general. She doesn't really... She's saying she's part of them by being this Wayseeker and still following the Force, but really she's running away. That's essentially what she's doing in this point of in her life. And she's obviously much older here. She's not young like she is in the High Republic novels. So it's not like this is someone who's lived through a lot, and they're thinking about, not directly, but indirectly, they might be thinking, how long can I go through and see all these things happen that pass by in life and loved ones lost and whatever happened with her apprentice that was bad enough. She's not necessarily thinking these things directly, but you get the sense that what she's doing is running. Master Indara, on the other hand, also from the Acolyte, this is her, she's much younger here. I think she's about 20, so this is her like kind of in her early stages. She also suffered a sort of tragedy, and because of that, she's also hiding without admitting it. She prefers to stay in the archives of the Jedi and just doing research on things. And anytime a mission comes up, she does her best to always just kind of stay on the administrative side of things. She's afraid to go out into the field because of what happened. So she's also kind of running from things and not admitting to herself that that's what she's doing, but that is what she's doing. And so now these two are forced into a situation together where they're kind of judging each other, but they all, at the end of the day, they're both really very much alike. And I did enjoy that aspect of it very much. I don't remember much of Indara from the show. And I guess, I mean, she, you know, spoiler if you haven't seen the show, this is an Acolyte tie-in, so I feel like I can talk about show specifics, but you know, she does die very early on and we don't see much of her until a little bit later in the series, so it was kind of a blank slate for me to just kind of see what she's like in her early years, but I did enjoy her perspective. Vernastra, I think, is an interesting character in general. I like the idea. If you don't know who she is from the High Republic, she's kind of this gifted Jedi who became like a master with an apprentice when she was in her teens, like 15 or something like that. She was very young. And just, she was so gifted. She's kind of the idea, you hear every once in a while, you hear in the news those stories about the kid who, you know, he's like 16 and he's going on into college courses because he's just that gifted. That's kind of what her character is. So it's very interesting to see the dynamic of reading the High Republic and seeing her at the very early stages in her life to now when she's kind of in the later, much more adult stages, and the kind of difference in her thoughts through that. And I think that's conveyed pretty well here. I will say this is definitely more, I think this is more of a High Republic follow-up than it is a Acolyte tie-in prequel. And what I mean by that is, I don't think you'll learn much, I don't think this will give you much more understanding of the Acolyte by reading this. Because it doesn't, obviously it's not going to talk about, you know, Osha and the twins, it doesn't mention the stranger, anything that happened there, Master Soul, any of that, that's not part of this at all. This is... So if you wanted to read this to gain more insight into the background of the Acolyte itself, I don't think this book will do that for you. This is much more, I think, a sort of follow-up to the High Republic initiative in general. There are plot points from the High Republic that are used here. There are characters. We get to visit with different characters that are part of the main High Republic novel that are still alive in this time and kind of see where they are. We see some descendants of characters from that era. This is very much a High Republic follow-up. Imagine you have a story that finishes up, it's done, and it's weird because I know I've seen things like this before, but I can't think of an example right now. Sometimes you have stories that are done and then they'll go back years later and they'll do another story and just be like, hey, let's see where the characters are years later, let's have one more just little fun adventure, maybe tie up some ends. What was done before was complete, but let's just have a little follow-up for fun. That's kind of what this book feels like. It feels very much like a follow-up to the High Republic. Again, much more than it is a prequel, I would say, to the Acolyte. Something I thought was interesting is that the chapters switch perspectives between Vernestra and Indara. Any chapters about Vernestra are in first person, so it's her thoughts directly, while the chapters about Indara are third person. I thought that was interesting. I'm not quite sure why it was made to do it that way. I will admit it did, as the chapters switched perspectives, it did help keep me focused on them in a surprising way. I'm sure there's like an intent behind why Vernestra's thoughts are in first person, and the way she tells the story. She's kind of, during her chapter, she's the one telling the story, and in Indara's, it's back to third person. And it's just an interesting choice. I don't know if I've read something like that before. But it worked in keeping me invested for sure. The villain, I will say, in this book, that's probably the weakest part of this book, is the villain. There's nothing wrong with the villain. He's just kind of a bit stock, a bit cliche. There's nothing really surprising about him. You kind of understand what he is as soon as you read about him, and there's a twist that kind of happens with him towards the end, but it's not really a twist because, again, it's kind of so on the wall. You kind of see what's going to happen. So I would say that's the weakest point about this novel. Again, it's not a negative point. The villain, he does his job. He's totally, he's fine. Works in the story. It's just nothing that you haven't seen before when it comes to villains. Overall, though, again, this was an enjoyable read. It's a surprisingly short book. I don't think it even breaks 300 pages. The chapters were short. It's light. It's fun. Again, nothing groundbreaking, nothing that kept me at the edge of my seat, but I was thoroughly entertained throughout the whole thing, and I did enjoy it. I would say, if you're someone who likes the High Republic in general, the High Republic Initiative, this book is definitely a must-read. It'll feel like just a great follow-up to that whole era. If you're someone that's looking for just an Acolyte prequel in general, if you thought the character of Vernestra looked interesting, or you want to learn more about Endora, you'll probably enjoy this. But if you were hoping that this was something that would give you more insight into the Acolyte itself, that's not going to happen here, and you would probably find yourself disappointed. So it's going to depend on what you're looking for. But overall, I do think this was a good book, and I do recommend it. But that'll be it for my first reading review. If you've read the Acolyte Wayseeker, let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Let me know if you enjoy the High Republic in general. I'm curious if this was kind of an interesting thing to read. I know the last High Republic novel just came out. I haven't got it yet, and I'm curious. It's interesting because I think how interesting it would be to read this one after the final novel. But let me know your thoughts. Anyways, that's it for today. Have a good day. And